Iran has announced that it is set to break the uranium stockpile limit set by the nuclear deal. A spokesman for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization said that it would break the 300 kilogram stockpile limit set by deal in the next 10 days. He also acknowledged that Iran has already quadrupled its production of low-enriched uranium. Iran had earlier partially withdrawn from the deal it made with world powers in exchange for lifting international sanctions. The announcement comes amidst rising tensions between the US and Iran, with US blaming Iran for the attacks on 2 oil tankers in Gulf of Oman. Cherry farmers in the United States are fleeing the heat of the US-China trade war. Reports of China having ramped up checks on fresh fruit imports from the US have been doing the rounds. US cherry farmers say such checks could delay shipments from US growers already dealing with higher tariffs as Sino-US trade ties worsen. Tensions between the US and China rose sharply last month after the Trump administration accused China of, in fact, going back on its promises it had made during the month of talks. An increase in Chinese tariffs on most US imports on a $60 billion target list took effect on June 1st, with Beijing retaliating against Washington's escalation. Huawei founder Ren Zhengfei today said that the effect of the US's ban on the company was more severe than expected. The founder put up the estimate of revenue cut at $30 billion over the next 2 years. This is the first time that Huawei has quantified the impact of US actions. The US had put a ban on the Chinese smartphone maker, alleging that Huawei products can help spying on the US. The comments come after Huawei officials had maintained that the company was technologically self-sufficient. The former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi died in a heart attack on Monday. He died while he was in court from the heart attack. The first democratically elected head of state in Egypt's modern history, Morsi collapsed in a Cairo court while on trial on espionage charges. The 67-year-old, who was a top figure in the now banned Muslim Brotherhood, had been in jail since being toppled by the military in 2013 after barely a year in power following mass protest against his rule. His death is likely to pile up international pressure on the Egyptian government over its human rights record, especially conditions in prisons where the thousands of Islamist and secular activists are in fact held. Boris Johnson is being criticised over his refusal to take part in a televised debate alongside his 5 rivals in a bid to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Broadcaster Channel 4 left an empty, chair for Johnson, who has a commanding lead after last week's first round of voting by Tory lawmakers to replace May. May stepped down last month after being unable to secure the Brexit deal. The UN has expressed concerns about the increasing violence in Yemen. Ahead of the UN Food Agency accused Yemen's Houthi rebels of diverting food from the war-torn country's hungriest people. The World Food Programme Executive Director also told the Security Council on Monday that the agency uncovered serious evidence of the diversion of food in the capital of Sana'a and other Houthi-controlled areas. 8 people were killed after a boat sank off Turkey's coast on Monday. Another 31 people were rescued. A boat carrying migrants to Greece sank into the Aegean Sea off the coast of Bodrum. Search and rescue operations are being carried out by the Coast Guard. A helicopter and a team of divers are also looking for the missing people. The cause of the sinking is said to be determined. Hundreds of people are also making the crossing each week from the Turkish coast to the Greek islands. Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido has in fact called for an investigation into claims of his representatives having misappropriated funds that were intended to help defectors from the Venezuelan military living in Colombia. For months now, more than 1,400 members of Venezuela's armed forces had fled to Colombia. They have in fact heeded Guaido's call to disavow socialist president Nicolas Maduro. The National Assembly, led by Guaido, has been accused of using funds intended to pay for the cost of the troops' hotels in the Colombian border city for personal purchases. Parts of Argentina are still reeling from Sunday's massive power outage. Several business owners in Buenos Aires were left without power as electric companies struggled to reconnect services in parts of the city. On Sunday, a shared power grid between Argentina and Uruguay suffered from a technical snag. Snag led to a massive power outage in South America. At least 45 million people were left in the dark. Argentine President Mauricio Macri promised a thorough investigation into what he called an unprecedented outage. The outage had raised questions about flaws in South America's grid, which connects many of the region's largest countries. At least 30 people have been killed in a triple suicide attack in northeast Nigerian state of Borno. State emergency officials said this was the biggest mass killing this year by suicide bombers. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. The Boko Haram group and its Islamic State splinter group have often carried out attacks targeting civilians and the military in Borno state. Their attacks have claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and displaced millions of people. Now, victory celebrations for the Toronto Raptors turned ugly as 4 people were wounded after getting shot at during a parade in downtown Toronto. The fans were celebrating the city's first major sporting title in more than a quarter of a century when gunfire broke out, followed by a stampede as people tried to flee the scene. Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders has said that none of the 4 people who were shot have sustained life-threatening injuries. 3 people have been arrested and 2 guns recovered so far, while the motive behind the attack is yet to be ascertained. In a latest breakthrough, doctors in Bengal have called off the strike after meeting with Bengal CM Mamata Banerjee. The doctor said the chief minister had good intentions and dubbed her as a guardian after Banerjee in fact had accepted their demands. She also suggested a 10-point plan to ensure security at the hospitals. A meeting was held in presence of the media as hospitals around the country suspended non-essential services in solidarity with the Bengal doctors who went on strike last Tuesday after 2 of their colleagues were beaten up by the family of a patient who died. At least 130 people have lost their lives due to heat stroke in eastern India, state of Bihar. The Indian Met Department has issued a series of heat alerts in response to the high temperatures, which are expected to last for several more days. The Met Department has been advising people not to go out during the hottest hours to prevent a heat stroke. U.S. weather officials said severe storms in central Indiana has produced at least 4 tornadoes, leaving thousands without power and damaging buildings. No injuries were reported so far. The National Weather Service said that tornadoes with strong winds, in fact, had struck Oakville in Iowa, where one reached peak wind speeds of 193 kilometers per hour. A tornado destroyed a farm building and threw farm equipment up to 100 feet in the air. The death toll from 2 strong earthquakes in China rose to 11, with 122 people injured. Rescuers pulled some survivors from rubble in part of a country that often suffers from strong tremors. The quakes, roughly 30 minutes apart, hit the southwestern province of Sichuan late on Monday, with shaking felt in key regional cities such as the provincial capital of Chengdu and the metropolis of Chongqing. 4 people rushed into the streets and cracks were left in some buildings by the quakes. Pictures posted on social media accounts of state media outlets showed the visuals of the damage. In Germany, 18 million tons of food are thrown away annually, according to the environmental organization WWF. At the end of February, the Minister of Agriculture and Food presented a national plan to reduce food waste by half by 2030. Already, unsold items in supermarkets are being recovered by activists in the fight against food waste. More than 4,000 bikers from over 40 countries participated in a bike race in the Italian Alps. Contenders had to cover a distance of 86 kilometers across a mountainous terrain, while the men's title was won by Colombia's Hector Leon. The women's title was clinched by Italy's Maria Fumagalli. It was the 10th edition of this race. The Rugby World Cup trophy was blessed by a Shinto priest during a ceremony at a temple in the Japanese city of Kyoto. During the ceremony at the Shinno-mago shrine, priests prayed for a successful tournament, which will begin on September 20th when host Japan faced Russia in Tokyo. The shrine is believed to be the site of the first rugby match in Japan's western Kansai region. Japan is the first country outside of rugby's traditional heartland to host a World Cup.